Well, the origin story of this whole investigation that's loomed over the president for a year now is that in May of 2016, George Papadopoulos, a newly appointed foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign, is in London, and he's having a boozy night of drinking at an upscale Kensington bar, and he's with a top Australian diplomat, and he let slip the fact that Russia's got dirt on Hillary Clinton. Now, we now know from court documents that have been released by Bob Mueller's investigators that at that point, Papadopoulos knew that Russia had, quote, thousands of her emails. And this is well before anybody knew about hacked emails, well before emails were being released publicly. So in July, when those emails start to trickle out, you can see the American intelligence agencies start to get concerned that, wait a minute, what's happening here with these Russia cyber operations? And then they learn from the Australians that there's this chance that people in the Trump campaign knew in advance about those emails. Obviously, that is what triggers, that's what gets that concern going early on.
But you also get this profile of George Papadopoulos, and two different versions here. You have the Trump camp that's trying to portray him as a coffee boy, but also in the reporting here on this article, this is a guy also who was trying to set up a meeting with the Egyptian president and President Trump, also outlining, his first major foreign policy speech for the president here. So what is it here, and where does that get reconciled at all, if at all?
Right. I mean, obviously, George Papadopoulos was a very ambitious advisor and was taken seriously or not seriously from time to time by people high up in the Trump campaign. But look, he was asked to edit Trump's first major foreign policy speech, and as we reported, he helped broker a meeting, a high-level Egyptian meeting with Donald Trump, and this idea that he's just a coffee boy, unfortunately, it's become sort of a talking point, and it ignores a lot of the facts we uncovered in a number of emails. And frankly, the Russians clearly saw him as a way into the Trump campaign. Some of the emails we've been able to see are just remarkable, where people saying, Russian intermediaries saying, I'd like to become a campaign surrogate. I'd like to quietly go out and write op-eds for you or speak on the campaign's behalf without acknowledging, my role.
Fascinating in the reporting, saying that these spies look into peripheral players here to get that leverage, to get that insight.
Exactly.
Maybe they saw this guy as one of them. Talk about the timing here, especially as it plays into the larger investigation picture here, especially, you think about it and sitting on this as far as the Australian diplomat sitting on it for a couple of months before coming out with it. How does that all come into play, especially with Mueller looking in and then the plea deal?
Yeah, I mean, so we don't know why the Australians didn't come to the United States in those months from May to July. Now, we know that the United States government didn't really take the hacking totally seriously until the emails started to get released publicly, and that changed their thinking that this was like a weaponization of the democratic hacking. And so, I mean, it's certainly plausible that the Australians, that was a passing comment that didn't have a lot of significance until suddenly, oh wait, that guy said there were a lot of emails, and now there are a lot of emails showing up on the internet. So that maybe they didn't make the connection till then. We don't actually have real clarity into why the Australians waited so long.
Well, when it comes to your sources, fill us in on the timeline when it comes to that. Is this something that the Times have been, sitting on for a while, working on it for some time? And then the reason why we ask, if you look at this put together, you have the GOP, the president, in recent days, they've had that narrative come together and saying, you know what, when it comes to this and when it comes to the attacks, you have the dossier, the Steele dossier coming out, and you have this that may, throw cold water on that altogether. But when it comes to these sources, and you have the president's tweet, they're saying who these, quote, sources might have been. Talk about that when it comes to your reporting and who these sources are, especially at a time when these sources, are anonymous.
Sure. So this is something that my colleagues and I have been working on for a long time. I mean, George Papadopoulos has been, a obvious reporting target since documents were released this fall showing that he was cooperating with Mueller's investigators. I mean, look, we were pretty transparent about who we're talking to. We're talking to current and former U.S. government and foreign officials with direct knowledge of the Australians' role in this, and the question of whether or not the Steele dossier, this is this former British spy, who was hired through a lawyer as part of the Clinton campaign's efforts to collect information on Donald Trump. The fact that the Steele dossier may have been the trigger for this investigation, that's been pretty clearly not the case for a long time. And we saw John Brennan testify earlier this year that he was seeing intelligence that Russians were trying to suborn members of the Trump campaign. And that was something he was concerned about. And of course, we didn't know what that was. I think we now know that at least one of the triggering events for this was George Papadopoulos having a little too much to drink and letting slip one detail too many.
Well, and it makes you wonder, how far up the chain did it go? Have you seen any evidence of higher-ups learning about this? If that's the case, is it because there are none? That he kept it that? He just said, I'm closing my tab, I'm out, this is as far as it's going to get? Or, that maybe there are other sources about this that are just holding back?
So we've seen a number of emails, and we quoted from a number of emails that George Papadopoulos exchanged with members of the campaign and with his foreign contacts. We didn't see any evidence that showed that Papadopoulos passed that information about Russian-hacked emails to higher-ups in the campaign. Now, if he told it to somebody in the Australian government, if he recognized it was significant and interesting and he was trying to be on the make in the campaign, would he have told somebody in the campaign? Yeah. That is a clear question that I think reporters are trying to answer. I'm sure Bob Mueller has asked Papadopoulos that and has asked others about that. We've not seen any evidence that George Papadopoulos shared that information with anybody in the campaign, and that's a key question. And
speaking to that, Matt, if he never showed up at the Kensington wine room, or if he just did one round instead of having this, night of heavy drinking, as you report, would you have a report on this? Would we know about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, history's weird in the way it lines up sometimes. I don't know. I have to assume that given the hacking and given the many contacts between the members of the Trump campaign and Russians and Russian intermediaries, contacts that have been falsely denied, I have to assume that there would have still been an investigation, but I don't know. I don't know if we'd be where we are today if not for that conversation.
You said history is weird, and so are the circumstances when you have one too many. Some of us know.